there are products that make real gains, and that's cool. But trails are really cool too. So why don't we talk about trails and trail advocacy more and stuff like that? And there's a lot of people doing good, right? And we got to keep lifting those stories up and getting them out there, and just telling those people thank you. And that's the cool thing. Bikes bring a lot of people together that you would never interact with otherwise, right? You can go on a bike ride and it's this level playing field.
Welcome to Trail Effect. I am your host, Josh Blum. Trail Effect is a show that dives into the stories behind trails, the communities that embrace trails, and the people who rely on trails as a way of life. The goal of this show is to turn the stories you will hear from our guests into useful knowledge that can be applied to your community while providing some entertaining and inspirational content. Guests on Trail Effect include trail builders, board members, community leaders, volunteers, and regular people who really enjoy trails. For episode 174, we have Daniel Sapp. Daniel is the current president of Pisgah Area SORBA, co-founder of the Backslope, as well as colleague to the infamous Seth Alvo of Berm Peak. Prior to this, Daniel was a journalist for Pinkbike, among other publications, and Daniel has spent most of his adult life in various roles in the mountain bike and trail world. Ultimately, Daniel provides his take on the importance of mountain bike trail advocacy during this episode. Stay tuned all the way to the end as we close this one out with a Mike Levy story involving a bad decision. Cooley Creative is the title sponsor for this episode. They design and build custom websites, as well as help companies with branding, photography, and e-commerce. Cooley Creative was started in Wisconsin, but is now based out of Bend, Oregon. Jared from Cooley Creative is a friend of mine. We've traveled together on multiple mountain bike trips, and sometimes he sends it. For more information about Cooley Creative, head on over to www.dudejustsendit.com. Yes, that's right, www.dudejustsendit will get you to the Cooley Creative website, so check it out. As we officially kick off the summer bike park season here in North America, I would like to highlight another affiliate partner of the Trail Effect podcast, which is the Loam Pass. The Loam Pass is your one pass for 40-plus destination bike parks. When you purchase the Loam Pass, you get 2 days at each partner location, as well as an additional third day for half off. That means if you went on some epic road trip, you'd have over 80 days of access to some of the best bike parks, period. When you purchase your Loam Pass through the affiliate link found on the Trail Effect website or found in the show notes, you will receive free pass protection. Yes, that's right, free pass protection. And you'll be supporting the Trail Effect podcast as well. Some of the 40-plus destinations include Ride Rock Creek, Ride Canoga, Luciano Bike Park, Angel Fire Bike Park, the Keweenaw Adventure Company, Chestnut Mountain Resort, Jared's Place, Spirit Mountain, Marquette Mountain, Burke Mountain, Howler Bike Park, and many more. So click on the link provided for the Loam Pass, support the Trail Effect podcast, and get free pass protection. Thank you. Kettle Mountain Apparel, the brand that was built by travelers, hikers, trail runners, and mountain bikers, with the motto of venture far, laugh hard. While I definitely use Kettle Mountain Apparel for mountain biking, Kettle Mountain is also my go-to choice for daily wear as it is super functional and comfortable. Kettle Mountain Apparel also offers a lifetime gear repair program with the goal of extending the life of their products while reducing waste in the process. If you ever damage any of your apparel, Kettle Mountain will repair it for free for life. By using the affiliate link found in the show notes or on the Trail Effect website, a small commission will come back to the Trail Effect podcast, which helps to cover the cost of expenses for keeping this show going. Now on to the Trail Effect with Daniel Sapp. Here we are today on Trail Effect. I have Daniel Sapp. Daniel is the current president of Pisgah Area SORBA, and he's also part of this thing called Backslope.com, which is, I believe, under the umbrella, or maybe it is the umbrella for another infamous thing known as Seth's Berm Peak. But we're here to talk about trails, trail advocacy, all the things that is going on in the land of Pisgah Area SORBA and the Appalachians. How are you doing today, Daniel?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's a good Friday morning.
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I know. We've worked for a long time to make this happen. Even ran into each other in person, but schedules just haven't allowed it. And it's largely been on my end. It's been just a little chaotic. So,
well, you had some stuff, and we've had some stuff, and now we're here. So that's all that matters.
Thanks for the patience. I've been looking forward to this.
Of course. Let's go into your backstory first and how you got into mountain biking and mountain bike media, because prior to the stuff that I, threw out there for an intro for you, you had a role at Pinkbike and you've been in media and trails for a very long time.
Yeah. How did I get started mountain biking? It's a long time ago. I grew up kind of in the Piedmont region of North Carolina, which is east of the mountains, kind of the middle of the state. And in school, some of my friends, their parents owned the bike shop in town, and ended up like that was after school care a few days a week. And I got really into, always loved riding bikes, even when I was on, just training wheels, which, we don't do those these days as much. But I would just, laps and laps in my driveway, like burn up tires. Like I think a lot of kids did that. But, it quickly progressed. It's like, oh, let's build jumps, let's build ramps, let's build this, and, before long I was, riding my red wagon down the street with scraps from construction sites, one neighborhood over, with my dad being like, what are you doing? And yeah, building ramps in the yard. And, it got to where we could kind of roam the town and go ride wherever, whenever. It was my freedom. I got one of my first mountain bikes from my friend's parents' shop. It's my dad says last bike I was ever going to have. So it's a 19.5-inch Trek 6500, toe clips, all that. I still can't ride a bike that's 19.5-inch size. It's like Trek's medium large, or they're larger on the medium side. And so I never grew that big, but I rode that bike everywhere. And, long story short, I did a couple summer camps up at this camp in Western North Carolina mountains where they had a mountain bike program. And it wasn't just like mountain biking as part of the camp. It was, like where you go do it one day. It was the entire week was mountain biking. And they took us out into Pisgah National Forest and took us down some pretty rugged trails. I mean, I remember us carrying extra brake pads in our backpacks and stuff like that because you would burn up brake pads, with the old brakes and everything. And I just loved riding bikes, through high school and everything. I was kind of like the weird kid riding bikes. In college, I went to Appalachian State University, got up there. There was no mountain biking really in Boone. I'm like, what's going on here? So, I started riding road bikes a little bit and all of that. Super fun, raced a bunch of cyclocross. The mountain biking kind of like was out in the forest, out in Pisgah, but, a different part of Pisgah. And it was 45 minutes from campus. And so, eventually found some other buddies, Mike Thomas, Andrew Mueller, like Will Washam, and several others, which is funny. Everyone I just named is still heavily involved in bikes and trail building and the bike industry and trail advocacy, all of that stuff. But we kind of got together and we built some trails. And, one thing led to another. We were often running into each other on the way to class and it'd be like, oh, what are you doing? It looks like I'm going to ride bikes and build trails instead of go to class. And, through whatever series of events, I ended up in the recreation management program. I don't think anyone advised me to do that, especially not my parents. They're like, what are you going to do with that? You should get like a business degree or something. And it's like, well, I want to do what I want to do. It's like, I can't do this business stuff. I can do it. I can take the courses, but like, I'm just a dead person sitting in these classes. And I was really interested in the recreation management and, seeing how there are different, you can do parks and rec management, you can do outdoor experiential education, all of that stuff. And I had a couple of professors that were incredibly influential, and not influential in a way that I think I would have ever thought a professor would be. They were like, yeah, you can go do that. You can go ride your bike. You can do this or that. You want to take the last 3 weeks of school off and go to California and race some and go to Sea Otter and like do all that stuff. Cool. Just make sure you get working. And I did. And that got me out to a lot of different places. So like every summer I was going on mountain bike trips. I worked all winter at a ski shop, saved up my money and blew every bit of it every summer. Like went out west until I ran out of money and then like needed to call home to get money to get home. Yeah, I showed up in Bellingham one time. It's like 2007, maybe. My buddy Brad Walton's door. I was like, hey, Brad, I just moved to Bellingham. He's like, oh, where are you staying? I was like, I don't know. He's like, okay, you can stay here. And, he made some calls and like I ended up loading boxes at Transition for the summer. Kevin and Kyle, they're awesome. There were like 5 people at the company at that point. It was up in Ferndale. It's way different than it was now. Bellingham was definitely a scene, but nothing like it is now. yeah, so like we'd go to Whistler every Wednesday and stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, I just like rode bikes like nonstop. I love riding bikes. I had no clue what I was going to do with my life. I got out of college, after many of those trips and everything else. And it's like, I sold insurance for a little bit. And then, yeah, I had a buddy at Specialized, like a good buddy from college. He's like, yeah, I'm like having to do all this. And he's like, I need help. And, I ended up in marketing at Specialized, and traveling all over the place, like mostly on the East Coast and working with global PR and stuff like that for a few years. And yeah, met a bunch of people then, ended up at Bicycling Magazine. Bicycling got sold. Mike Kasmer calls me up one day. He's like, hey, are you still good? And I was like, yeah, I'm good. Like I'd have to move to Pennsylvania to stay at Bicycling. I don't really want to do that. People in PA are great. The riding's great. I'm a North Carolina person. Like there's a few other places I would consider living for sure, but North Carolina is my home. And I was like, well, you're calling me. So, obviously, there's some interest, like what's going on? And ended up talking to him, Brian Park, and I was at Pinkbike for a few years after that. This is turned into a long story. But, that's kind of like, that's how the progression was, with COVID ramping up and everything else. I was still at Pinkbike, had some opportunities to get into consulting and tech at a fairly high level. It's just something that kind of clicked with my brain, at least the consulting part of it. The math and the spreadsheets did not at all. But, on that time, I started working with Seth as well. Seth lives right down the road from me. Don't know who he is, Seth Alvo. He has a YouTube channel, Berm Peak. It's fairly popular among mountain bikers. And, turns out a lot of people that don't mountain bike we found. We both had kids on the way at the same time. Like very similar situations in life, very different industry experiences. Like Seth's a content creator and I'm, like coming from, traditional media in a sense where it's like, we're like, what are these content creators doing? And, kind of like, there's like a distrust and hey, they're taking our money from, ads and marketing at companies and stuff like that. And I was like, more I got to know Seth, I was like, oh, Seth is not like that at all. He's, an incredible person. We click super well, work well together. Yeah, started running his PR and communications, and it has substantially grown from that.
We got to back up for a second.
Oh boy.
We're going to back all the way up to your high school, taking your brake pads into the woods for mountain bike camp. Did that happen to be under Christian Jackson?
No.
Okay.
So Christian was, when I talk about influential professors in college, Christian was one of those. And Christian's become one of my best friends. It's really cool. Yeah, I never thought like in college, I was kind of like, I'm just trying to get this work done and get out of here. Like me figuring out how to minimize how much work I did outside of being in class was my number one priority because I didn't want to be doing that stuff at home. The way my brain worked, I actually pulled it off somehow. I went to the library of like 3 times in my entire college career. And I didn't always get great grades, but I got out of there with a degree. And yeah, Christian gave me the leeway to do a lot of stuff.
Yeah, he probably understood at that moment that life experiences might trump classroom experiences.
He did. And, we've talked about this a little bit, because there's another professor, Melissa Weddle, who I don't think I got along with her that well in college, but, she steered me in the right direction. I mean, great friend now. And she's awesome. I've talked to both of them about this a little bit, but, it's like a student sees things differently than a professor, obviously, right? As a good professor, as both of them are, I think they are able to see things in students and see like this traditional way of learning is maybe not working that well for you, but they want to see success, and success isn't necessarily checking every single box that, the education checklist has, for college or whatever it is. It's what's successful for this person and looking at the person. And I think they both do a really phenomenal job of that. And I think, it's impacted my life greatly.
Yeah, it sounds like it because you are literally going across the country from one coast to the other and taking advantages of the experiences that were presented and possibly creating your own too.
Yeah, I've got a lot of wild stories. I've always liked to say yes to a good experience. Like obviously there's a bit of a litmus test. Is it safe? Is it, ethical? Is it, moral? All of that. But like you can have a lot of good experiences by just taking a chance and, being okay running super low on money and being broke for a bit, or going somewhere you haven't been, or trying, not being afraid to have to walk your bike, like think of that in the sense of life, right? You shouldn't be afraid to ride a trail just because you have to walk your bike.
I've said that a lot to people because some people will not ride maybe certain, we'll say, quote unquote, black or expert level trails. And it's like, but it might be a trail that has one feature on it that you need to walk. Why would you not ride that trail to then get there?
I've walked down the majority of some trails. There's stuff out there that's scary. That was a big awakening for me, is, going to the Pacific Northwest for the first time and never ridden something so steep that your bike just falls out from underneath you. It's like, okay, this is different,
Which is interesting coming out of Pisgah, because that's got some steep stuff too.
It does, but it's different. It's two different beasts. Like, they're both equally hard in their own way. I go somewhere else and ride, and I've had the opportunity and been fortunate to be able to travel all over the world to ride my bike. Lots and lots of places. And you go somewhere and it's really hard. It's like you spend a month in Whistler or the Northwest or, somewhere else. And it's just, you're riding all this super hard stuff, rock rollers and sketchy route chutes and everything else. And I come back here and it's like, oh, it should be great. And I learned, years ago that that's not the case. You come back here thinking that and you're going to get thrown on the ground fast. It's everywhere is different. Everywhere can be hard.
Let's get into the transition from Pinkbike back into Backslope. You and actually more importantly, trail advocacy, because you kind of started going down that path with your story a little bit earlier. But let's get into the details of transitioning out of Pinkbike into advocacy.
Yeah. So Pinkbike was awesome. Some of the best people I've ever worked with there. They got bought by Outside. And, I think there's a lot of opinions one way or another about that merger acquisition. But, merger acquisitions happen. It's how companies grow, and it's how people are able to move forward and retire and stuff like that. And like, I don't think anyone can hold that against anyone. Everyone still there is awesome. And yeah, I still stay in touch with Kaz here and there and Brian Park and all of them. But working at Pinkbike is like mentally taxing. You look at the comments section, right? And it's terrible. When you're the one putting something out there, it's so stressful. Like, you proofread something 100 times and there's always going to be an error and someone's going to call you out on it. And like, it may be insignificant, but it's just like knowing that there's an army of people out there waiting to say, got him on that, and just, it's kind of toxic. I don't think it's great. I think like they've done some things to work and improve that, but it's, I can't handle it. It like mentally took a toll on me. I kind of just wanted to hide in a closet for, years after that. We had a kid on the way, and like financially it's just like, okay, here's a opportunity that makes a lot more sense, and let's do that. Seth and I have been working together. We're like, we want to start something at some point, with his experience and my experience being very different, but having a lot of overlap. People kind of kept asking us advice on things and, hey, can you help us with this? Or how do I start a bike park? Or how do I do this? Or how do I do that? And, we eventually settled on the name The Backslope and formed that. The Backslope is now just mine because of the way that the logistics of everything work. Seth and I still work together multiple times a day, all the time. And so it was like kind of originally intended to be like this big umbrella thing, but it made more sense to make it just mine because I'm running like these trail advocacy projects out of it. And so Seth ended up I intercepted these communications, managing his communications from the Great Trail State Coalition, which is an organization in North Carolina. And they advocate for and promote, increasing trail access, increasing the number of trails, and very importantly, increasing state level funding for trails. There's a lot of states, you look at Florida and Virginia and, several others that are putting hundreds of millions of dollars into trails every year and trail infrastructure. And when I speak about trails, I'm not talking about just mountain biking trails. We're talking about everything from greenways to double tracks to equestrian trails to blueways, paddle trails. We can jump in a kayak or canoe and, paddle however many miles, hundreds of miles, camp on the way or not. All sorts of trails, but all muscle powered trails. So we're not, trails is a really broad term. There's cultural trails. There are, motor trails. There are OHV trails, tons of different stuff. And like, they're all really cool in their respect because they're trails. But, when I say trails, we're talking about human powered stuff. And anyway, Seth is advising for the coalition and everything. I'm still doing super corporate tech consulting and, doing project readouts to these, big companies. And they're like, okay, we're in over our heads. Seth, can you just do this for us? And like, I think a lot of people think that Seth just goes out and makes videos and, just bebops around or something. The production schedule to put out the videos at the pace that he does is absolutely insane. There is no free time. We get invited to go all these cool places and everything else. Or people are like, can you come do this? Or can you come ride our trail or do this? Or, we'd love to meet you. Or it is absolutely not possible. It would be really cool. And he would love to do a lot of that stuff. It's not feasible. It's a job. And so it's like, well, I can't, but Daniel probably can. Let's figure it out. And so we ended up putting together some stuff for them and working with them, along with another agency, really awesome agency that does more of the creative branding kind of stuff and graphic design and all that, and started managing all the communications and PR for the Great Trail State Coalition. And we ran this whole program called Year of the Trail in North Carolina. And so Year of the Trail is legislatively designated. It was designated in 2021 to celebrate trails and all the benefits that they bring and those who steward them. And the goal with that was to show legislators and, all the elected officials the importance of trails and to hopefully increase funding for trails. And we have lobbyists with the coalition. It's a pretty big thing. And, we worked together with a phenomenal team of other people, including a ton of volunteers, lobbyists, and elected officials to get like $50 million pushed through for trails this past year in state legislature. And that'll be distributed over the next 2 years. So yeah, that's one project that Backslope does.
Let's back up to 2023 because that was the actual year of the trail, correct?
That's correct.
So with, as you transitioned into 2023, do you have a good story that maybe came out of that Year of the Trail campaign that sticks out in your head in terms of like dealing with people on the ground, or something that maybe somebody wouldn't actually know about Year of the Trail that was like an aha moment for you or you and Seth?
We came into it a little bit late in 2022. Everything, like all the groundwork it was supposed to have been being laid. And it wasn't necessarily done in the fashion that the stakeholders wanted. And that's why we were brought on board. And so we were kind of coming up to the table a year late and getting everything prepared for it. And so we had it with the caveat, like, we don't know how well this is going to do. We'll do our best. Like, we know we can do this better than anyone else because we understand marketing. We understand how the internet and, that's the basis of this whole program was social media marketing. We know how that works as well as anyone. We know trails as well as anyone. Yeah, we want to see it succeed. I mean, it directly benefits us, right? It's like, sure, there's a contract involved in all that, but like, we're excited because there's trails in North Carolina that are getting put in. Like, that's our goal. We want this. Like, if you know me or if you know Seth, like, that we're both incredibly passionate about getting more people outside and more people on trails, and just like letting people have experiences like we've had that have changed our lives. I'd say, like, the big aha moment, there's this big trail project. It's a greenway project between Hendersonville and Brevard, the Acosta Trail. And it's been a point of debate and contention among locals in the community, like as any trail. People are like, well, you're bringing in trails. Like, there used to be two big factories here, DuPont and Acosta. DuPont was where DuPont State Forest is, and they provided a ton of jobs for the community, like incredibly well-paying jobs. They allow people to retire with, savings and have nice homes and everything else. And when those factories left, it was a huge blow to the area. Like, the whole industry is gone. And the Acosta Trail is going to be on the train tracks that helped, supply the acoustic plant. And so there's a lot of pushback for various reasons. Less and less as people become more and more educated and, understand what's going on. But, this trail's been in the works for like 10, 15 years and just no progress, no momentum. Like they applied for money and not. The Hendersonville side in Henderson County had made a little bit of progress, and they made a good bit actually. Meanwhile, the Brevard side was just a mess, not making any progress. The county's supposed to be doing it. The county commissioners are questionable at best. And, the city ended up getting involved, and the city is, kind of championing it because the people in leadership there understand that, hey, this is going to bring a lot of good to the community. We need this. It's, you invest in infrastructure, business follows. Anyway, they applied for some grants and everything else. And last year ended up getting close to $50 million awarded. And it was in federal money, not state money.
RTP grants? Or RP, yeah.
No, the RTPs are state grants. I think I'm going to say it wrong, but I mean, one was like a nationally protected lands grant. The other was some sort of an infrastructure grant. I should know this off the top of my head, but I don't. I did at one point, but I haven't had to talk about it in a while. Those two grants were awarded to Brevard. It would have been huge to get one, but they got both because, obviously people saw the importance of this. And we hold these cities, towns, and counties meetings every month where like elected officials and people in, cities, towns, and counties across the state of North Carolina can come in and we tell them what the coalition's doing and everything else. A lady by the name of Palmer, who is, I would call her the executive director of the coalition, essentially. She leads those every month and gets everyone up to speed, but we have different speakers. And we had Maureen Koploff, the mayor of Brevard, speak in that one. And she's like, we got this grant for the acoustic trail. It's amazing, so on and so forth. I mean, it's huge news statewide and even beyond. And she said, I don't think this would have happened without Year of the Trail, because we were able to take what you were doing with Year of the Trail to the people that were, administering these grants and say, hey, if there's a year to invest in trails in North Carolina, it's this year. And I kind of like started out, I was like, maybe we can get funding for the acoustic trail or something, like that would be cool with Year of the Trail. And then to hear her actually say that, unprompted, it was the biggest validation that I could have ever had. And it's like, hey, our little marketing campaign actually did something, And so, yeah, I don't know. That's a big aha moment for me.
Yeah. And the whole conversion of, railroad beds or rails to trails, as it's commonly known, makes so much sense to turn into greenways, because you're like literally the foundation for that trail is there, pounded into the ground. It's flat and almost everybody, well, literally anybody could use it.
Yeah. And I mean, you've got to start somewhere, right? Like, yeah, I don't want, you're not, we used to take people mountain biking for the first time in Pisgah. I think we still do that. I think it's great. It's a cool way to learn and have a good experience. So you got to be okay walking your bike, but just to go out and have fun. I mean, I have a 3-year-old daughter now, and being able to just take her out for a cruise and just not have to think about much and have a good family time, or go ride my road bike or gravel bike somewhere and connect to other things. Like, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. Let's transition to Pisgah Area SORBA, because in this whole timeline of stuff happening, you became the president of Pisgah Area SORBA, which is a really strong powerhouse organization that is affiliated with SORBA, which is, I've said it before and I'll say it again, probably the most organized regional trail organization on the planet, for sure, in the United States.
Yeah. This is why I was still at Pinkbike, but everyone it's like SORBA is a bad word around here. It still is. We're working on it. I don't think it's a bad word now, actually. But you talk to a lot of people and it's like, oh, trail advocacy, SORBA, they're making the trails easier, this or that. And it's like, while I didn't necessarily agree with everything that had been done in the past, I knew that the only way to change it was to actually get involved. And it's really funny, when I worked at Pinkbike, I had all this spare time.
Don't let your bosses know that, right?
I don't care. I think call that extracurricular that gives you a broader knowledge to be able to, write from. I was like, well, I might as well get involved. It's volunteer. It's like a couple meetings a month, not a big deal. And well, I just like, they're like, oh, we need someone to be vice president. And we ended up having 2 vice presidents for a couple of years. And I was just on the board as a member at large. I mean, it was a ton of work, especially then we had a kid and all of that. And yeah, and then over the last year, someone needed to step into the president role, and that someone ended up being me. Yeah, and it's great. We took Sorba and, had a really great crew. Like everyone I've worked with on the board, and we've had a lot of different people on the board over the last 4 years and so on and so forth. It was a completely volunteer run organization, which is great in a lot of places. But here in Pisgah National Forest, the most visited national forest in the country, that is the first stopping off point for everyone, coming up from Florida or even South America, and, coming from Georgia and South Carolina and everywhere else. Everyone wants to ride Pisgah now. Like we should have had paid staff 10 years ago. And just 2 years ago, we hired our first paid executive director, Natalie Narber. And she is awesome. She has helped take the organization to a whole new level. But until she was there, we were just all volunteers doing the work of what should have been 10 paid staff. And everyone's like, well, why don't you have a paid trail crew or this or that? It's like, well, you can't have a paid trail crew until you have someone on staff to make sure that, donations are coming in and fundraising is being done so you can pay them. And so that's why an executive director was our first step. And things are growing since then, and it's super awesome. But, it's kind of the whole organization has transformed over the last few years. We have a really, really solid board right now, built on what everyone's done in the past. And, our ability to execute projects has grown and grown and grown. And now we're trying to continue to get up to the level of, where we need to be to maintain the trails that are in Pisgah, to keep Pisgah, and keep it, rad and rowdy where it should be, and provide alternates where they need to be, and so on and so forth. I mean, trails here are very difficult and tricky. And I think a lot of people can say like, hey, we should just let things be super blown out and rugged and just the way, that I know Pisgah. But okay, that's your experience. I think there should be plenty of rough and rugged trails too. I think back to when I first started riding here, carrying the brake pads in my backpack and everything was like way more chill. It wasn't eroded. We get insane amounts of rain here. We get more rain here than almost anywhere else in the country. One year we had like 200 inches of rain in a year. It's impressive. But what that water does is it just, anywhere there's a bit of a drainage, or there's not a drain, or a drain's clogged or something else, it just cuts away the trail faster than anyone could do anything. So,
well, and from the outside looking in, one of the biggest things you guys do at Pisgah Area SORBA is you have a great partnership with the U.S. Forest Service, and you really bolster what they can do, because I don't think it should be any secret to anybody, but the U.S. Forest Service and other government agencies are severely underfunded and understaffed. And what you guys can do is come in and really help them manage the forest, correct?
Yeah, and steward the forest. They are the land managers, and everyone in the local Forest Service office here in the Pisgah Ranger District. So Pisgah has 3 different districts, right? There's the Grandfather District, there's the Ranger District down here, and then there's the Appalachian District. And they're each managed differently and for, in different reasons. The Grandfather District is the Old Fort area. And so you see Northwest North Carolina Mountain Bike Alliance and the G5 Trail Collective doing a ton of stuff down there. And they're doing projects that we aren't in the position to do right now because of the way that they want to manage the forest. We have a lot more visitation here. And I think if anyone has driven into Pisgah via, Highway 276 on a weekend and then waited 45 minutes to an hour to get back out of the forest when you're done riding, you understand like there's a lot of people here working. One of the cool things like with hiring an executive director was we have like a solid person that is a constant point of contact for the land managers. And yeah, like you said, they're super underfunded. we did a video for Year of the Trail last year, separate from Pisgah Area SORBA, for the coalition on the Backcountry Horsemen. And so they're this volunteer organization that go out and they do trail work on horses. And I thought it was a really cool video to do because as a mountain biker, I've heard and like also felt, like frustration, like riding through a pile of horse crap. And it's like, what the hell, like, come on. And, people go far beyond that and get really frustrated at horses being on the trails and stuff like that. And, I think you look at any group of people and there are people that are a little bit easier to share the trail with than others. There are a lot of the vast majority of people on horseback are amazing to share the trail with. There are some that are not great. And I'll say the same thing about mountain bikers. There are plenty that are awesome, and there's more than a handful that aren't. So the Forest Service relies on all these partner organizations because they only have, like, their trail budget here in Pisgah last year was $6,000, which I knew that the number was low. But when we did this video, we did some interviews with some of the Forest Service personnel, and she pulled that number out. And like, is the last thing I expect her to do in a live interview, but she had researched it. She knew, like, she's like, yeah, we have a $6,000 trail budget here in Pisgah. And like, you think about that, like, how far does $6,000 go? You could, have a hand crew in for a week or two. Maybe. Like, if you don't need any materials, and like, it's not going to be that skilled at that. So, the Forest Service relies on partner organizations like Pisgah Area SORBA, the Carolina Mountain Club, the Backcountry Horsemen to do trail work. And we all rely on each other as well. Like, no one organization can do it all. And it's kind of cool. You see different projects. Like, all the trails here at this point are multi-use. And so that means, like, if you can ride a bike on it, you can definitely hike on it. You can hike on everything. You can ride a bike on a lot of stuff, and you can ride a horse on some stuff. And so, all these organizations work together to help each other out. Like, the Backcountry Horsemen get way out in the forest. Like, no one on a bike we don't have e-bikes here. And we do. People ride them in the forest, but you're not supposed to. And so that's a whole nother discussion. But getting way out in the forest with a chainsaw is really difficult, but you can do it pretty easily on a horse. And I mean, these folks are out there, like Tom Thomas, who he's kind of the head guy, one of the head guys at the Backcountry Horsemen of Pisgah. He went out in the coldest month of the year in January, camped out on South Mills River for a month straight, and just did trail work, mostly by himself. And it's like, okay, that's dedication.
Yeah. And I've seen the movie, and I've listened to another podcast with the Backcountry Horsemen, and I was pleasantly surprised in how positive the interaction appears to be between the mountain bikers and the Backcountry Horsemen. And because that is definitely not the case everywhere.
No, it's not. And, that was one of my goals with doing that video, was to shed some light on that and show that, there are a lot of different people working together to make trails stay here. And, instead of being rude or disrespectful to someone just because they're on a horse, maybe stop and talk to them for a minute. They're probably some of the people out there doing trail work, especially if you find them out in Pisgah. I mean, Pisgah's not an easy place to ride a horse, really. And it's cool. Like, I think it's really important that people understand how the trails are maintained and how you steward the trails, because I think I said, like, we don't need bikes if we don't have trails. And
we're going to get to that.
Yeah. But it's like, it's such a fine line because, with the amount of use, and like, I don't expect everyone to do trail work or to be involved with the trail organization. Like, go ride and have fun, like, and if you go somewhere, like, you don't even, like, cool, if you want to donate to the trail organization, that is awesome. But like, you should just go ride. Like, there should be enough people that are actively involved in trail work that it doesn't matter that much, but there's not yet. And so we need more people involved with it. Yeah. It's just like, everyone's out there trying to achieve this common ground and, make things better and so on and so forth. So yeah, really trying to shed some light on those interactions.
Well, and some of the trails that you guys have been able to, I'm going to call it rebuild, are Avery Gap, and then a couple sections of Black Mountain, and then most recently Butter Gap. So I've ridden all of Avery Gap, all the Black Mountain stuff, part of Butter, the part that was built. And from an outsider coming into Pisgah, I thought all of that stuff was great. Like when I rode Avery Gap the day before you and I met back in March with Matt Malone, and so it was awesome to be able to ride that trail with the trail builder and kind of get some of the backstory and how it was built or why it was built in certain ways. And even, I mean, it's no secret that he got blowback on that, right?
He did. He got a ton. I think the organization got a ton, right? And I mean, I have mixed feelings about work that's been done and so on and so forth. I think it's all moving in a positive direction, though. I have a blast riding Avery. It's funny. You're always going to get blowback. You can never do right. Like, you can never do right. And that's the hard thing. Like, we're in this sport where everyone's super passionate about it. But I don't know, if you don't like it, just move. There's a ton of trails everywhere.
I don't know if I've said this in the podcast. I've said it definitely to people, but when I was a volunteer for my local trail org and working with a lot of elected government officials locally, but then also now in my new role where I, work again with a lot of elected government officials, point blank, I've had multiple government officials tell me the biggest problem that they have with mountain bikers isn't mountain biking, but it's the infighting that they have to deal with. And so that's the last thing that if we want to get more progress as a user group, having that public infighting, whether we like a trail or not, is probably one of the biggest things I would say that holds us back as a user group.
Oh, it's hands down the biggest hurdle, right? And it's sad. I think everyone has a right to their opinion, and like, I think most of the opinions are based in like some very valid stuff. Like, it's super frustrating. I think as a volunteer, it's incredible. That's why you have volunteer turnover so much. It's just like, like the comment section at Pinkbike is, like the same as reading comments
Instagram
that
sometimes.
People. Yeah, I mean, I've just turned all that stuff off. I can't do it. I know we're doing good work. And like, honestly, the 99.9% of the feedback is great. But, you get these couple of people in the community that for some reason are just trying to stir stuff up or fight or whatever. The thing that kills me is people just making memes on the internet. Like, I don't look at that stuff, but someone will send one here and there. I'm like, who has time to do that? Like, I mean, do you have a family or something? Okay, you don't have a family, that's cool. Like, why don't you go ride your bike? Like, and I don't know, it's like, congratulations on being good at the internet. Why don't you try to be good at life? Yeah, it's sad. But, that weighs a lot on us. It's like, I really want everyone to be happy. I want everyone to be super stoked on work that we're doing and have to accept that like, there's going to be a couple of people that aren't. I talk to people about volunteering and, getting involved all the time. And, I have a lot of friends who are involved or aren't involved for one reason or another. Some it's time. And, one person that I have a lot of respect for told me last week, they said, I want to get involved, but I'm afraid to, just because of like all the people that just like have negative opinions about this or that and everything else. And it's like, well, that's super disappointing, So I think it's just like, yeah, more positivity is a good thing, because it's when people are just out, stirring up stuff for no reason other than to suit themselves, then it's keeping a lot of good people from being involved, and people that, you really want involved. I mean, this person, it's like, well, they built some incredible stuff. They're an incredible rider, but they're shying away from getting involved because people talking on the internet. I mean, I get it. I totally get it. I don't blame them one bit, but I wish that wasn't the case. And there's a lot of people that can work to change that. So, it's not like we have to get upset at anyone. It's just like, hey, let's be more stoked. Let's be good.
Yeah. And that's a really good point you bring up, and I think obviously people aren't probably they're looking at things from that angle when they're maybe typing a negative response to whether it's a post on Instagram or something on Pinkbike or whatever. Usually it's an Instagram thing when it comes to trails, because as we've alluded to, there's not a lot of trail coverage in places like Pinkbike for the various reasons, is, it just doesn't gather the clicks, right? But that's a good point. Like, let's think about what we're saying before we say it or type it, right?
Yeah, our words have impacts on people. Words are powerful.
They are.
What we say matters.
Yeah.
Yeah. The cool thing is that, working with land managers and the Forest Service, like they get those people too. They actually get it on a bigger scale than we do, I think, because they're dealing with different user groups and everything else. Like they get people like, well, you didn't make this trail this way, or like, I really like that, or, so on and so forth. And, they get it just on a much greater scale. And so, we worry about those people like damaging our relationship or something. They're not. I mean, the Forest Service understands. They know that there are crazy people. I have some buddies that work in intelligence, like for the U.S. government. And one of them was telling me about like how they just get crazy showing up at their office. It's like the people that just show up with the conspiracy theories. And, I was telling them about something that he's like, oh man, we get that all the time. He's like, yeah, I've gotten my elevator speech down to where, it's like, we have to hear him out. Like I want to hear everyone out. Like everyone has the right to be heard, everyone deserves to be heard. I think, even if they're coming up with like just hateful craziness and, once at least, repeat offenders. No, but he's like, yeah, I've gotten it down where I can get someone out of the office in 10 minutes now. They like bet whether it's a valid concern or not. And then, thank them for their time and on your way. I wish we could do that.
When I worked for the government prior to my current role, I have some repeat offenders, we'll call them. And so I'd put those people's numbers in my phone. And so I knew exactly what the call was just so I could, screen those calls. But I was in a meeting. This is now working in my current job at Rock Solid. I was in a meeting. I think it was at the park. It was with a parks director. And he called them cave people. And I'm like, cave people? He goes, yeah, citizens against virtually everything.
That's pretty good. I like that. I mean, I hate it because like, I know who some of these people are and like they're brilliant people. Like they're really smart. Like they're good at whatever they do. Right. But then there's pouring all this time and negative energy into that other stuff. Like, do I personally love like every single thing that's been done in Pisgah? No. Not at all. But what I did that's different is instead of getting on the internet and complaining or like trying to make a comment that, made me laugh, made myself laugh. And like had a buddy like share it with someone, I just get involved and like try to understand the process and how it works and, so on and so forth. And like, it's fine. Not everyone has time to get involved, but like, at least don't detract from those that are trying to do good. I think that the hard thing is that everyone has a lot of passion rooted in this sport and everyone has an idea of how things should be. And when we see an idea that's not like ours, that's not the same, it's easy to get defensive. I've really tried to look at it from a different lens and understand that like most of these ideas that we're all having are within 3 degrees of each other.
They're exactly
all super, super close, right? Everyone wants the same thing. Like if you sit down and talk to anyone, like if you pull the internet comments out of there, like any of that, if you just sit down and talk, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, we want the same thing, but we have a different idea of how you should get there. And the hard thing with where we're at with trails, for a lot of our trails at least, is it's Forest Service land and it's government. And nothing's fast. It all takes time. It takes process. It takes understanding that there are other users than us. Yes, it is everyone's land. U.S. Forest Service is all of our land to share, but that doesn't mean it's like your land to do with whatever you want.
Well, one of the more positive things that I think have came out of this, and at least I've seen a lot of positive comments around it, is the latest Butter Gap reroute. Which,
it's good.
Yeah, which I don't know if we're completely done there. I think we still, like you said earlier, before we hit record,
I think there's about 2 weeks left, maybe.
Everybody focuses on actually the reroute of Butter Gap, but maybe you could just quick give some high level details about how that will function now that it's rebuilt and some of the other ancillary things that aren't getting talked about that came along with it.
Well, so Butter Gap is what we would call legacy trail in the Pisgah Ranger District. It's been there for years. It's funny you mentioned Christian Jackson. He did trail work on Butter Gap back in like 2002.
He told me that. He told me it was the first thing he ever adapted.
Yeah, exactly. It's when he was running Outward Bound over at Cedar Rock. And so he has all these drawings and super cool stuff. We'll do a little Substack story on that at some point. Yeah. So it was a trail that a lot of people rode, and it would run well for like a week or two a year. And then other than that, it was like kind of some pretty big mud pits up top. And like it was blown out in a way that was kind of fun to ride for a bit of it. But it was dumping a ton of sediment into Grogan Creek, which, feeds into it all eventually feeds into Davidson River and French Broad River, but it's way downstream. But one of the big things we worry about is we don't worry about it as much, but we are worried about it as a product that damages the trout populations, all the sediment in the streams. And so, it's not necessarily like an individual riding their bike on it that does it, but that ruts out. The trail wasn't built super sustainably to begin with. And we're getting these increasingly heavy rains. And so the water's just eroding and washing away and washing away. And so I want to say back in 2015-ish, like 10 years ago or so, the Forest Service identified parts of it as unsustainable. A realignment was proposed. And so we're talking 10 years ago. Realignment was proposed. Previous Forest Service people and board people walked that line out, planned it, got a grant for it. All this happened before anyone that's on the board at Pisgah Area SORBA right now was on the board. Got the grant, was awarded this RTP grant, state grant. So Butter Gap was on the list. The same thing that was with Avery, same thing as Black Mountain. Those were all RTP grants, and those were all 10 plus years in the making. Butter Gap's the last of those projects. And so the cool thing with Butter is that it is a reroute of parts of the trail, but it's almost like a whole new trail because it takes what was, a 30-second, if that section of trail, and makes it, 3 miles. And it's very different, but then it has some of the elements of the former trail in there, which is kind of cool. It crosses back over the creek at the same spot and then goes on to more new trail. And it's super neat. That is coupled with another piece of that whole thing was the Searcy Creek connector. And so we decided a couple of years ago to split that project up with another organization that does a ton of trail work, the Pisgah Conservancy. And so TPC took on that and we took on Butter. And, so at the bottom of Butter Gap, everyone had always ridden it seasonally mostly because while there are ways you can climb out this trail Long Branch. It's a bit of a punch up. It's just, it kind of cuts it short, to go get your bike super muddy and ride a couple cool sections of trail and then just have to climb out. And it's all right. But the bottom was Cat Gap, and Cat Gap goes to this place, the Fish Hatchery. And it is a it's one of probably the 2 or 3 busiest places in that little zone of the forest for hikers and everything else. And so Cat Gap was seasonally open to bikes. So it's open from October 15th to April 15th and then closed in the summer during the busy season. But, it's the past 3-4 years, things have gotten busier. With Butter and that whole project, have a new exit that's open year round to bikes. Closed down some old parts of the trail that were falling in and unsustainable for hikers or bikers. And now you have this super cool single track experience. You can go ride single track and nearly a completely single track ride outside of some climbing on double track for miles and miles, more than anything else around.
That's awesome. And you guys got I think at least one new rough sawn bridge out of the deal.
Yeah, I think they're working on the bridges right now. I rode over one a couple of weeks ago, but they've done a lot since that. So
let's transition into why you were suggested to come on this podcast by another individual, which is an article you wrote on the Berm Peak Substack, which is without.
Who was that?
It's a guy out of Florida that is really heavily involved with his local trail org. And he had sent it out to me. He's like, you got to get Daniel on and talk about without trails, we don't need mountain bikes, which is honestly something I've thought about for almost as long as I've been a mountain biker.
Yeah.
But it's also a very difficult topic to cover, right?
It's super hard, right? You read what I wrote. And my perspective, to me, so Seth and I started this Substack. It's like a subscription-based publication. People can get videos a couple weeks early, and we do written articles and stuff like that. And I wrote this article And it's like, without trails, we don't need bikes. And like, kind of the advocacy thing's always been a puzzle for me. When I was at Pinkbike or bicycling, like, there are all these, like, you get pitched a lot of stories from other people. Like, we're writing stories and we come up with stories and everything, but other people would pitch them too. And like, there'd be like a cool trail advocacy, this or that. And wouldn't necessarily make the front page. Like, there's a ton of stuff that comes in that, either just doesn't get published at all or, doesn't get homepage time and stuff like that. And I mean, it's just vibe. That's just how it is. Like, it's no one's fault. Like, they have to get numbers. You have to get the right amount of views. Like, people don't want to buy ads anywhere that's not getting any watch time. And trail advocacies, turns out, doesn't end up being exciting as like new bike parts.
Or Red Bull Hardline when you got a gap over like insane.
That's a whole nother discussion. I have some thoughts around that. It's not as interesting. When I got into media and bike media, all I wanted to do was tell stories about trails and stuff. Like, I was never that into the tech stuff. Like, I can get into it and I can, nerd out on that stuff all day. And I like having nice bikes and I like having, cool tech stuff to an extent. But I mean, I have buddies that are like, oh, like fiddling with stuff constantly and so on and so forth. I'm just like, whatever. If it's kind of close, I can ride it pretty well. And it's not a big deal. Like, the bike doesn't make you a good rider. It's not how it works. And I've just always thought that tech is kind of oversold and whatnot, but it does keep that part of the industry going, and it's super important, and helps people race faster and so on and so forth. Like, there are products that make real gains, and that's cool. But trails are really cool too. So why don't we talk about trails and trail advocacy more and stuff like that? And like, the way a lot of stories work in bike media, if you don't know, like, there are product launches and things like that. And so let's say Fox is putting out a new product. It's an easy example. They will want to get all the media people to them in a location and ride that product kind of under their supervision almost, to, because like, you can send someone a fork, and if they don't set it up correctly, then it's going to feel terrible. And it's not really fair for them to get a terrible review because someone didn't set something up correctly. You can make something really bad feel really good, and you can make something really good feel really bad with just a few turns of a dial. And they have these product launches, right? But a lot of times at the launches, they're kind of coupled with some sort of a trail advocacy story or something else. And, Fox Factory does a phenomenal job of their trail advocacy. They have their trail trust program. They give back a ton to the trails. But, you go to this product launch and you're kind of expected, you're going to cover the tech. And there were a number of times where, like, there could have been a story or there was a story, and it's just like, well, I don't know, like, that's just not the priority. And it's like, well, that's kind of way more interesting to me. But I mean, I get it. Like, your job at, most of the mainstream outlets, they need to cover the tech stuff. Like, that's what people, that's the quick read, that's the quick click, and it's super interesting to a lot of people. And I do think we've seen a bit of a shift. I think I definitely got a couple of texts after I wrote that article from people at some of these publications being like, really like the article. We do this, and this, and they're like naming off all the things that they do. I was like, yeah, I know you do. And they're like, yeah, like, I appreciate your perspective and all that. But I was like, we can always all do a lot better. It's, the trails are really, really important. And I think there's a lot of people coming into the sport that just think that trails exist. And it's not a good thing. Like, I've heard from a number of people around here that, who are doing trail work, and people that have been doing trail work for many, many years. And it's not just here in Pisgah, it's like across the state and other places. And they're saying mountain bikers don't even stop or slow down. It's like we're in their way when we're out here doing trail work. And I'm like, that kind of hurts my feelings a little bit. It makes me feel embarrassed. And it's like, do people not understand? Like, if you weren't out here doing this trail work, then, it's not going to just do itself. You're not going to have somewhere to ride. I mean, the least someone can do is, stop and say hello. And I mean, I'm guilty. Like I've definitely ridden past someone doing trail work, like with a number of people behind me before, and like not been able to slow down as much as I should have, and felt really bad that I just like hollered a hey and like, hey, have a good day, thank you, like, and I usually like to stop and like stop and talk for a minute, but yeah, it's just yeah.
Well, it is interesting to me that there are, and maybe it's just my personal awareness around this more, but there are companies that are starting to really step up and cover this. One of those companies, Specialized, which you said early on that you'd worked for, I think what they're doing with soil searching is, and this is my own personal opinion. So, and I'm a Trek mountain bike rider. The shop I do all my stuff through is a Trek, so I got to throw Trek in there. But anyhow, they're different though. But what Specialized is doing with soil searching is honestly one of the things that inspired me to do this podcast, because I think they are doing a really good job telling the story and making it entertaining for people to consume.
Yeah. Soil searching is an incredible program. I think I agree. It's one of the coolest things out there. They're doing a phenomenal job with it. Specialized gets a bad rap for plenty of reasons. Some of them absolutely deserved. Some of them not. I think when you get down to it, I still have a ton of friends that work there, and they're all really good people. They love riding bikes. Like, you look at the soil searching program, you look at Outride and what they're doing to get kids on bikes. We just helped get this middle school here, like a couple, I don't know how many, it's like 150 bikes or something, helmets and all that, and Specialized helped make all that happen. It's super cool.
Yeah. And I look at the inverse of that, and I'm going to throw Trek out here. And that is they have Trek Trails, or the Trek Foundation. And it's like you almost have to dig out what they're actually doing. No pun intended with the word dig, but like they don't really promote that at all. But at the same time, they're literally dropping millions of dollars into trail systems. And to me, it's like, why are we not talking about this more?
Yeah. And everyone at those companies would love for you to talk about it, right? Like, they want those stories out there. It's super important. And I think it's really important to get those stories out there too. Like, not just because like, hey, the company wants me to, but because it validates what they're doing, for one. It gives them reason to continue investing in it. And it keeps the people that are working in these programs, like, whether you're getting paid or not, trail advocacy is kind of a thankless job. It shouldn't be, but it keeps those people motivated. Like, I think it's super easy for people to burn out in trail advocacy because it's thankless. It's just like, we're never making progress. Like, look, these people are just arguing about this, like this trail got shut down or this or that. And I mean, you see stories all the time, but there's so much good going on out there. I think it deserves to be recognized a lot more.
Is there a way that we can, and I'm sure you've thought about this a lot, and it's gonna be a hard question to answer. I'm just telling you that right now. What can we do to really try to bring more positive awareness? And I think honestly, this is part of the problem, is that it's positive, and it's negativity that seems to sell more than positivity. But what can we do to kind of help these stories, advocacy groups such as Pisgah Area SORBA, or Specialized with soil searching, or whatever, or even, Santa Cruz with Pay Dirt, or Fox with Trail Trust, or Trek with Trek Trails, or I could probably keep going on and on and on about, different organizations and companies that are really trying to push the trail agenda forward in a positive way. Like, how do we spin it to get more views, to bring more awareness around it? Because that's, at the end of the day, I think personally, it's really around awareness. So you do have, when you have a group riding through, seeing other people work, like, they at least stop and say thank you, or say thank you and keep riding.
It's hard. I don't know. It's a super hard question. You figure that out, and then things will be pretty good. But I think it's looking at more than, like, there's a lot of people doing good, right? And we got to keep lifting those stories up and getting them out there, and, just telling those people thank you. And I think a lot of people in the industry, like, I think probably everyone that listens to this podcast is, thinking the same thing. They're like, yeah, this is important. Like, duh, we get it. Yeah, obviously we need trails. We want to support trails and trail work and so on and so forth. But, getting people out there and involved, that's huge. But also understanding that some of these companies, there are a ton of awesome companies in the bike industry that care a ton about trails that maybe don't have the budget to pour them into to create a soil searching program or to create trail trust. And that's okay. It's kind of like, you look at volunteering with a nonprofit like Pisgah Area SORBA, right? When you have someone on the board, like, okay, what do you bring to the table? Like, okay, this person's an attorney. This person has this industry experience. This person's an accountant. And, obviously all passionate about trails, or this person owns a trail building company and, they understand, how to build trails correctly. That's why you want them on the board. And it's like, maybe you can't get all these companies to volunteer their time. That's fine. But there's a lot of people that have a lot of knowledge and experience, and making sure that those people have a way to get involved is really important. That's something we struggle with as an organization at Pisgah Area SORBA, is like, how can we give people the means to get involved? Because you get someone out there and they do trail work, then it makes an impact, right? They understand, and like, you got to get creative with your trail work too. It can't just be clearing ditches, even though that's the most important thing you can do. Get water off the trails, at least where we live. Get those people involved, but also educate that there's a whole generation up and coming, and it's like our kids and, that generation between like my 3-year-old and me. How do we engage them? And that's a really tricky thing. Seth and I talk about that all the time. Like, how do we engage with this person? Because there's a lot of people that have gotten into the sport recently that they don't know what Pinkbike is. They don't know.
Somebody doesn't know what Pinkbike is? Are you sure?
I'm always surprised when someone doesn't. I'm like, oh, well, that's fine. You don't have to know. And it's just like bike news website. And they're like, I don't look at bike news. I just go ride my bike.
It might be a good thing. And that's not to cut on Pinkbike. I'm just saying it's a good thing.
No, totally. I mean, it's like, yeah, just go ride your bike. Yeah. There's this, like, the biggest group of people riding bikes. I feel like we miss them. And I don't totally know how to hit them. Seth and his channel, Berm Peak, does a really good job of engaging those people. And a lot of users that maybe don't engage traditionally with mainstream media, but that's only a fraction of them. I think interacting with people on the trail, not being afraid to stop and say hello, not acting like everything, like just have a conversation with someone. It's like, ask them how the day is going. What are they going to ride? It doesn't always have to be like, hey, you good? You need help? All right, see ya. Like, Nika's a good thing, like up and coming. Like, it'd be cool to see more people get involved with that. But, a lot of kids don't want to race. They just want to ride their bikes. Like, it's such a different landscape now than it was when we were learning how to ride bikes and getting into it. Like, you don't see, if I saw kids like grabbing scrap wood and building ramps in their yard, now I would be really pumped. But everyone has a bike park to go to now. So,
yeah. Well, it's interesting that you brought that up early on, because it's like, because I used to do the same thing, and I'm like, and when you said that, my brain went to like, it's interesting that we thought it was okay to take scrap from construction sites and do whatever we want with it.
Yeah. My dad actually had a little talk with me about that. He's like, I mean,
because I did it.
Yeah. Like, even out of like the dumpster, it's like, well,
yeah.
It's like, now you would get arrested for like walking onto a construction site, I think. But
yeah, things were different back when we were growing up.
They were, but he's like, you can't just like take stuff from there. I was like, yeah, but they were throwing it out. It's like, but yeah, no, just don't do that.
Well, you closed that story without trails, we don't need mountain bikes with a question. And I'm going to kind of do a spin on that question, which is a question that I always ask people to close this podcast out. And your question was, would you rather be asked, where do you want to ride, or what bike do you ride? And I'm not going to ask you what bike you ride, but I am going to ask you, what are the ingredients of a trail community? And I say this first, answer it selfishly. You don't have to answer it in what might help Pisgah Area SORBA out. But what are the ingredients that you feel make a great trail community in a place that you'd want to ride your bike?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of people with a positive mindset, willingness to work together for a common goal, and understanding that you're not ever going to make everyone happy, and not letting that get to you too much. I think the toxicity can destroy things. I've lost so much sleep over like people that don't matter, and like people that are just trying to sow discord in the community, and just like tear things apart. It's not worth it. Like, if you know you're doing good, then keep doing it. If you know you're just like kind of trying to stir the pot, find something better to do. And surround, a community that's surrounded by people that are doing good and building each other up. And I think there's a lot of those communities. I think the thing that we all struggle with is tuning out and not giving attention and creed. Like, I don't even like talking about it. I feel like we've borderline talked about too much.
I would agree with that.
But you don't want to give too much bandwidth to anything that's not good. Like, there's a ton of good work, and a healthy community, like, it has people from all multiple generations, and like, there's a lot to learn from people that have done it before you, and there's a lot to learn from people that haven't done it and bring a new perspective to things. And it's really important to listen to those people and respect them. It's so cool. The board of directors that we have now for Pisgah Area SORBA is very broad in skill sets, experiences. There are people that have ridden bikes their entire lives on the board. There are people that have not ridden as long. Like I said, we have someone that's an accountant. Like, there's people that have all these different interests, but they all enjoy riding bikes. And that's the cool thing. Bikes bring a lot of people together that you would never interact with otherwise, right? You can go on a bike ride and it's this level playing field. Like, you're all suffering up the same climb. You're all enjoying or not enjoying the same, technical feature on a trail, and so on and so forth. And it's just like, it's this common ground that otherwise you wouldn't have. And working together to just create more community around that and just more positivity that's my best bet at it. I don't know.
Yeah. And I think we do need to highlight that. And you've said it a couple times, but I want to underline it. And that is, a lot of people think if they want to get involved with the trail organization or do trail work, is that they actually have to physically go do trail work. And the reality is that trail orgs need all sorts of different skill sets. If you're a graphic designer by trade, maybe you can help create, something for the trail org that has to do with graphic design, or like you brought up an accountant, or maybe someone's a lawyer, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's all sorts of different skill sets that don't include actually going into the woods and digging.
And those skill sets are so important, because most of these organizations, like Pisgah Area SORBA, nonprofit, like, we're in a very financially stable situation, but if we had to pay for all of the professional services that people help us with, we would not, we would need more money. I mean, we always need more money. Like, all these organizations need more. And so, like, it's really awesome when people donate their expertise and their thoughts. One of the hard things for me is, like, I want opinions, like, constructive. You can disagree with something and please tell me, right? If someone doesn't like something, I want them to tell me, in a respectful way. And I'll either take that feedback and, share it, or maybe we can change something moving forward, or I don't know. It's really hard to be one or two people. And it feels like that sometimes. And the weight of everyone's opinions in Western North Carolina resting on your shoulders, essentially, right? Because it's like, you want to make everyone happy, but you can't. So it's really important for other people to get involved. And, we really, with our board meetings, we did Zoom meetings for a long time during COVID. And we actually have a Zoom meeting coming up, I think. And by the time this is published, I'll probably have told everyone that I want to do all the meetings in person moving forward, because we don't have that many a year. And you get this different engagement with people when you're in person, right? And it's important that everyone feels like they can be heard and their voices can be heard. And you can't always fulfill everyone's demands or wants or needs, but you can work together to kind of like meet on some common ground. But until you know what those thoughts and opinions and everything else are, you can't do it. And it's just like, it's way less stressful to have more people involved. So, like, people should get involved with their trail organizations. Get out there, dig, volunteer to help the board out, donate money. Like, there are three things that kind of keep things going.
Well, and it definitely helps to, like, I mean, I like getting different opinions because it actually does provide a different look or lens on certain things in a way that you or I may not have seen it. And when you can actually have a physical conversation or dialogue on a certain topic, people do change how they look at things because they understand that Jim or Susie over here might be looking at it from a completely different perspective because of whatever their way of doing something is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like everyone's like looking at things through your own lens, through your own life experiences. And I mean, shoot, as long as you're being constructive and like understand that you may want something a certain way, and just because you say it doesn't mean you're going to get it. I think that's the key thing. A lot of people have opinions and they think that just because you say your opinion means you get it. And that's not how things work at all.
How's that work for parenting?
It doesn't at all. I've learned, like I said, like there are things that happen that I don't necessarily, I'm not going to say I don't agree with them, but it's like, I would love to build a ton of like rake and ride trails. That would be awesome. I love rake and rides. We can't build those in Pisgah. Sorry. Like there are reasons why, right? It's like you can't have everything you want. But if you get involved and you show up and you contribute and you're productive and constructive and you're not just like trying to tear people down or just, being weird, then you can make a difference.
You just totally spurred my brain on a whole different topic, which is bike parks. And that is...
Bike parks are awesome.
Well, I was just going to say, there's a place for everything.
Yeah.
And that rake and ride in Pisgah might not belong in Pisgah, but it might belong at Ride Rock Creek or Ride Canoga.
Yeah, Nico will build that for us.
And you can get that experience.
And it's pretty cool that we have that now. Like 4 years ago, we didn't have any of this stuff. We have 2 bike parks right down the road. Yeah, thanks, Nico. And Callie and the whole team. Callie's also on the board of directors for Pisgah Area SORBA. It's just incredible. And yeah, you have to pay to go ride those places, right? But how much does your bike cost?
They have Kashima-coated bike racks now. I mean, come on.
Right. It's fine, and it's okay. There need to be trails for everyone, and we need to be able to get more people into the sport, and there has to be some level of progression and so on and so forth. And, I think having those bike parks is really important to being able to keep like these national forest trails sustainable, like take some traffic off of them and provide some of the options that they can't provide, and hopefully
pay some staff. You have some employees, right?
Exactly. It's putting back into the economy, that's what we got to do. And yeah, it's super cool. Like, I think, you talk about trail work and all of that. And there's people like, no, we don't want to reroute or we don't want this or that and everything else. It's like, well, if less people rode it, no, I mean, the stuff wasn't built sustainably to begin with and, water and all of that. But being able to take some pressure off of those trails, put it elsewhere, it allows for a little bit of breathing room to come up with some ideas to more sustainably manage them and to keep them how they are, which is that's a high priority for me moving forward is, avoid having to do big reroutes and kind of keep trails as they are and add to the system. But it's a long game, like we're looking at years, not months of, getting things like that done. So.
Well, and I think that's a good way to close this one out. Whereas, when we go into this, we got to understand that we truly are playing a long game, and that's where I think a lot of people tune out because we're in a society that expects instant returns, right?
No, our attention spans are super limited. I mean, mine is. But yeah, that's the hard thing. Like, I was talking to the person who's the recreation director for this part of Pisgah yesterday. We were out hiking. There's a ribbon cutting for a really cool thing in the grandfather district at Catawba Falls yesterday. And we talked for probably an hour walking back down the trail, just about how it's managed differently over there than here. And, because of visitation and so on and so forth. And, it's like, we can have new trails. Like, it's not that we can't have that. We're just trying to get up to the place where we're sustaining what we have and then we can do it and, figure out the right way to do it. Like the resources are super limited from the land manager side. So it's how do we work with them as a partner organization?
Yeah, well, that's a good way to close this one out. Although I think I'd be doing everyone injustice if I didn't ask one bonus question that you can totally say no to, and I can totally edit this one out. And it's really humor more than anything.
All right.
You have a good Mike Levy story?
Yeah, I got a ton of good Mike Levy stories.
I just listened to him on another podcast actually. Wait, this week.
Did he do a podcast recently?
So it was the Feeding Off Each Other podcast he was on.
With Jason and yeah.
So it might have
Cool.
the show came out a while ago, but I was just catching up on it, and I love his stories, and I definitely miss him at Pinkbike.
I miss working with him, but you know what? Like Pinkbike's gnarly. Good on him. Like he's I think he's just like riding his bike a ton now, and doing some other stuff. I think he's doing really well from everything I've heard. But he needs to give me a call, Mike Levy. If you hear this, give me a call. A good Mike Levy story. Okay, we were doing Brian Park will like this one too. Kaz, yeah, RC. Everyone knows this story, but we were doing field tests. It's probably like 6 years ago in Whistler. It was super smoky. Like it was a really bad forest fire season, and we're doing like trail bikes or something. 130, 150 bikes. Levy and I are testing them. Brian wanted us to go do some lap on some trail that neither of us really wanted to ride. And so Levy and I decided we didn't want to do that. And we were going to do a different trail. And like when you're testing these bikes, we have like 6 different bikes we each need to ride. And we need to do like a couple laps on each one. Whistler?
I have not been to Whistler.
Okay, hang on. I got to look at my trail forks real quick.
That's so I can tell you totally fine.
Tell you what trail this is. Because that's the important part of the story is what trail we chose to test on.
Yeah, Levy should definitely have like maybe his own podcast or some other way back in, because man, like listening to that Feeding Off Each Other
I'll have to check that out.
Reminded me how much I miss listening to Levy.
I always enjoy hanging out with him. He's good people. Okay, I've got it. We're back on track now. So yeah, Levy and I decide like the smoke is bad. Can't see across the village. Air quality is like, I think they have like all these different levels, and red's bad, dark red's really bad, and purple's like, don't even go outside. It was purple. But we had bikes to test. We're doing it for the people and for Brian Park. And we chose Dark Crystal as the trail to test. And so Dark Crystal is I think it's like a black diamond rated trail. It's super fun. It's over on Blackcomb Mountain. It involves a super steep pedal up. It's like close to 2,000 feet of climbing every lap. And we need to do like 3 or 4 laps a day for like a week straight. And Levy and I did that and it about killed us both. And I remember at one point it rained one day. It was really awesome. It was like our last day of testing. And he had that Mini, which was a death trap in and of itself. It's cool. It's fun to ride in. And I remember us like driving over, like choosing a different trail that day. And we just like drove over and we just sat in the parking lot for like an hour and just like total silence. Like, just like, guess we gotta go ride our bikes again. It's just a real struggle, but I don't know. That's not the best Mike Levy story, but it was kind of funny. Like Brian was like, well, you guys are dumbasses for choosing that trail. Why would you choose to, ride that much? For a test, to test something, you want something typically that is easily repeatable in a somewhat small time frame. And we chose this trail that, like, for a lot of people is like the one trail they would ride in a day. And so, yeah, we bit off a lot, but we made it happen. It's always fun. I miss that part of things, like traveling and, working with people like Levy and in different places and doing different stuff. I still do some of that. Like Seth and I still travel some. Nothing like that. We're always like trying to get back home because we got kids and we want to be around our families, and it's a different part of life. It's really fun. But yeah, and seeing some of the stuff, Levy always had a really good perspective on things, and I always appreciate that about him.
I was definitely not happy to see him go. I understand why he left, but his perspective on things it was a good perspective infused with good humor, which made it awesome.
Yeah. And, he just loved riding bikes. He loves riding bikes, which is super awesome. Yeah. It's cool, like traveling, like being at Eurobikes and stuff with him, because he would, he'd done it for so many years, and he had all these like little inside stories, and he'd be like, oh, check this out. And like, we walk into some building and like, where are we going? He's like, oh, we got to take the elevator up to this place and so on and so forth. He's like, here, it's a private office. No one's ever up here. You can just work here and no one bothers you. And it's just like in some like random office building near Interbike. And I'm like, we're in Germany. Like, what the, or Eurobike, sorry. Okay. And I was like, so it's cool. He's like, yeah, I've never had anyone come up here. You know, you can just like, we just work here. They have snacks over here sometimes. And it's just like someone's office that he found some years ago and has continued to use, I guess. So
whatever works, man.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. Well, Daniel, I really appreciate you taking as much time as you have today and that we were able to pull this one off. I think this will help shed a lot of light on the fact that, you know, being involved with trail organizations and bringing advocacy to the center stage is a very important part of mountain biking, because as you penned, without trails, we don't need mountain bikes.
Well, thanks for having me. I agree. It's super important. You know, I don't think I ever say it the most eloquent way, or, you know, and I don't have all the answers, but I think a good place to start is just getting involved.
Yeah. Wherever
asking questions, you know, ask questions instead of throwing accusations. And yeah, you know, like don't focus on the negative.
And find your niche, find your helpful niche.
Yeah. Like everyone can be involved somehow.
Well, that's how we're going to wrap this one up.
Awesome.
Thank you for listening. If you like what you've heard, please take the time to share these shows with others. Sharing these shows will help create awareness of both the guests who have taken the time to be on the show and the podcast series itself. Also, if you're new to the Trail Effect Podcast, check out our ever-expanding library of episodes. If you listen to the Trail Effect Podcast on Apple or Spotify, please don't forget to leave a rating and review, as this is one of the best ways to show our support for the Trail Effect Podcast. Also, don't forget to check out Cooley Creative at www.dojustsendit.com. For additional ways to help support the Trail Effect Podcast, check out the affiliate links tab at the Trail Effect website, where you'll find links to Kettle Mountain Apparel, Worldwide Cyclery, and Trail One components. By using the affiliate links found at www.traileffectpodcast.com, a small commission will come back to the podcast, which will help keep this thing going. This podcast has been edited and produced by Evolution Trail Services. Thank you again for listening.